Now, the Restaurants Association says it's disappointing that government did not reopen restaurants earlier under advanced level 3 of the lockdown. The sector has warned of large-scale job cuts and the closure of small businesses if eateries are not allowed to resume sit-down dining. Now, for further details about the reopening of the sector, when the Tourism Minister speaks at 5 p.m. today, stay tuned to Newsroom Africa Channel 405. We'll bring that to you live. But for now, we are joined in the studio by our reporter Mbali Tetani, who has been following that story for us. Quite a day you had in Parkhurst earlier on today, talking to various restaurant owners about their sentiments about the reopening of the industry. Where are they?
Of course, it has been quite a busy day for us. I mean, we started off our day speaking to the Restaurants Association of South Africa, Wendy Alberts. They're saying that, well, it's good and well that these regulations have now been published, which is something that they've been asking for quite a long time. But government has not really given them the necessary details. Restaurant owners are still confused in terms of, what will happen now when they open their doors. The issue around the capacity, that has not been discussed. There's also no guidelines in terms of when people come into the store, what happens. We know that in most cases where people go into, whether it is businesses, you are required to have a thermometer and to test somebody's temperature. There's also the issues around sanitizers, but there's also the bigger issue around, a social distancing, especially inside these restaurants. So they are still really quite confused in terms of, what do these guidelines really stipulate. But let's take a listen, Tammy, to what Wendy Alberts from the Restaurant Association had to say.
So if we have a look at the amount of restaurants that are being completely decimated and have fallen prey to closing permanently, it's massive. I mean, every day there are lists and lists of restaurants that are reported into us that we are formulating to send off to the Minister to be able to outline how severe the industry has been impacted through the fatalities of all these restaurants that have closed. And many of these restaurants are iconic restaurants around the tourism belts of South Africa. I mean, restaurants are renowned for international travel, for worldwide people to come here for the culinary exposure that our restaurants have got on the culinary map. So it's imperative that the resuscitation program for very many of these iconic sites is imminent, and that we look at a restructuring and rebuilding process in rebuilding the industry and saving the restaurant industry.
And obviously, in Bali, there are a lot of preparations that would need to go into place before you can actually allow customers to come into the restaurants. So I guess a need to know what is happening. And as far as the alcohol, I mean, at the moment, you're only allowed to buy alcohol Monday to Thursday from 9 until 5, and you cannot actually consume it on the actual premises, even when restaurants reopen. Where are we in that particular conversation?
That's another clarity that a number of people who own restaurants wants clarity on. It is the issue around, most of these restaurants, they are allowed to sell alcohol, but they're only allowed to sell alcohol on a takeaway basis. And they're only allowed to sell alcohol from Mondays until Thursdays, and for them, they basically saying that as restaurants, we make most of our profits as well from alcohol. And if we are allowed to operate from Monday to Sunday, the issues around this should actually be looked at. Can people consume their alcohol during the time where they buy their meal, whether they're buying a pizza or a pasta during their dinner? That this is quite something that people really consume when they're out in the public and when they're out specifically at restaurants. And when we spoke to a restaurant owner in Parkhurst, I mean, he really highlighted this problem, saying that it's a major concern for them. And if, Tammy, that they are allowed now to allow customers to come inside, it's going to be a bit problematic if they can't sell alcohol as well. Let's take a listen to Nico.
If we go back to last week, Wednesday, the announcement was released. They fast-forwarded restaurants to now go and sit down. It's been 1 week and 2 days, and sometimes the government, khulumu kakhulu, but no action. They said we could open, but we've had no instruction. Now we're abiding the law, business owners. If you backtrack to March, prior to the lockdown, they were allowed only 50 people in your restaurant, including staff. The complement of 50 people in total. Fast forwarding now to level 3, and with the advancement of sit-down, if we have to trade under those conditions, there's no way a restaurant can make money or meet their business means. Furthermore, the alcohol factor is a huge factor in this industry. It's like a priest going to church without a Bible. It's like a surfer going to the beach without a surfboard. Alcohol and food go hand in hand. A customer wants a glass of wine, a beer maybe, and more importantly, your average per head in this industry relies on sales of alcohol.
So I'm sure they certainly are looking forward to 5 p.m. today.
Certainly, when I spoke to Wendy Alberts earlier, she says that, well, you know, they have been in communication with the department, and this is something that they've been wanting them to elaborate on. And we now know, looking at the Department of Tourism, they are expected now to outline those guidelines much later on today. We know that there will be that press briefing at 5 o'clock, and most of these restaurants will be waiting to hear, you know, how they will operate. But Tammy, something else I want to touch on is the whole issue around looking at these restaurants. I mean, we've been going around, especially around Parkhurst, and they've got a number of restaurants. Most of them are closed, and even when you speak to the restaurant owners, most of them were really still a bit confused. So, you know, it will at least give them some sort of insight as to what can they do now, you know, leading up to now these regulations which have been lifted, especially on alert level 3. But let's listen to what the COCTA spokesperson had to say just in anticipation for that press briefing.
That I know that the restaurants have made quite a number of appeals in terms of how ready they are to comply with the COVID-19 regulations, but also casinos and conferences for business purposes are allowed to now operate. We want to note that the delay in terms of issuing these directions, but as we've always said, that we want to err on the side of caution. And as I said, that we can see that the numbers are growing, and therefore for us it makes it would be irresponsible for us to just blanket open all the sectors. But we're saying that the Minister of Tourism, where restaurants are concerned, will, I think, by midday today have issued direction in terms of what are the do's and don'ts as we open this sector. And likewise, the Minister of Trade and Industry will issue directions that will guide the casinos before they open. But we expect that these directions will be gazetted as early as today, because these conversations with the sectors have been ongoing.
Well, that brings us to end of our discussion just for now regarding the restaurants. Do stay tuned to Newsroom Africa. More clarity for the sector coming up at 5 p.m. tonight. Thank you very much, everybody, for that.